for life in the red. Thank you for dapping a pat on the head. Thank you for saving the banks as millions are drowning their debt. Thank you for all of the fluff and the nothing you said. Thank you for proving we eat up identity politics. All of your policy better forgotten. Just tell us what books you read. Tell us what record was top of your playlist, turning a wedding to Day of the Dead. What Quavo song went along on a heavy rotation, bombing Iraqis in bed. When they told you that 90% of your kills are civilian, what Jill Scott chorus was stuck in your head? What put you at rest after such a long day of convincing a nation it wasn't so deeply misled, that you weren't just Reagan with new age media training, who fed on our hopes like his daily bread, who preyed on the weak, who was never unwilling to serve you a speech to remind you the middle class needed to bleed, and you helped us succeed if you learned to accept it, and better yet, learn how to laugh as they bled. Round of applause, laughter erupts, mic gets dropped, it's the end of a set. And the crowd once hungry are now unstunned from the glow of celebrity, which is impressive, especially since they're contented to sit and be civil while all of the donors are fed. They thin out the herd by 1 million a week if it gives the elite an illusion of peace, like they're out of the path of the future we reap, and they won't be debris in the wake of its tread. But the future is now, bathe in the sound, drown in the dread. Hide in the lounge, hire more guards at your gatehouse, hire someone to come build you a safe house under your shed. Hide with your diamonds and files, the files you keep to yourself and the files you keep for the feds. Hide in the dark for a while and watch all the value regress. Watch all the worth of your wealth on this earth melt down in a pool with the rest of the cess. The affluence left over after the worldly collapse of the affluent. After it's back to the dirt with the rights of their birth, privileged smirks and their unpaid taxes, #blast. This has all been a nightmare, capitalism was only a test. So you need not weep and you need not repeat what the liberals said. We will not be saved by people who say that the water is safe while they look in your face and they pantomime sips of lead. Honey, nobody's lifting us out of this mess. Honey, nobody's lifting us out of this mess.
They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are. They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains, bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph or Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren. Say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights. Forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near. And all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't.
That's how it goes. We won't open our eyes, so we're the last ones to know. We're the last ones alive. Kept our enemies close. Wondered why we don't thrive while we're grasping at ghosts. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5. Counting backwards from 5.
Count back from 5. The theater on fire, the cast on strike. The studio stock starts taking a dive. The contract's tossed and they're gone with the tide. The heads and execs, their hands are tied. We can't pump this dreck and treat you right. But what do you expect from the industry type who survive by the leeching of bodies and minds? From those who original thoughts never seem to find. So they're gonna reboot ALF before your wages rise. And it gives cause to pause and reflect on the times. If they're losing control of their fools and their mimes, when all those obedient actors who grew their careers by averting their eyes are now holding the line, along with the authors of countless scripts that strengthen the hand of that corporate grip, squeezing our throats till we take the pen and we accept and consent to the corporate drip. Till you're all up to date on your pharma du jour, till you got a healthy support for the war on your lips. And now you know that the advertisers need more than a rerun summer full of flashback clips. Enter the scans from the year before, all the days of de-aging and mapping the face, and the hours of actors recording their voices are links in the chains that will bind them in place. Now all of those shows are so easy to make. When they got a drone they control that needs no break, it can bend, it can break, and it's cheaply replaced enough up-to-date films all in one take. And those studios bank on us doing our duty, unhinging our jaws and digesting the fakes. Because they know that we'll love how synthetic it tastes. Watch as they edit your features without any trace. Not that there's anything you could do anyway. Now watch as they show you a movie you used saying shit you would never say. Dystopia boldly accelerates. Maybe you're only a mold, something to fill with a clone, something that Elon would celebrate. Something they own, something they program and code, something that's woefully able to know it's exanimate. 'Cause it doesn't feel touch over top of the laminate. You will not feel an emotion, but they will not scan and examine it. You and the other consumer contaminants fed on the federal diet of Kiev, Havana, and Tiananmen. I can't be the only one weighing the pros of abandonment. I can't be the only one weighing the pros of abandonment.
Where did you think we'd go? Love, there's nowhere to lie. Guess it's not who you know, more it's what you can hide. Like we're chained to the floor, they're streaming us live while we're watching the war, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards from 5, counting backwards. I know you hated being forced awake. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. Ooh, I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
Pity not the vultures, they've enough to eat. Pity not the structures laying at your feet. Cannot see the sky, but there's this rainbow in the creek that spells pity-free speech when we can't afford to speak. That's Agenda 2030 on some early release. It's just our policy of never-ending chemical leaks. That's the cholera awash in your embedded beliefs. It's the billionaires who tell you what you'd better believe. And sugar, if you don't agree, then that's what we call extreme. Now if that isn't fascism, I'm going back to sleep. 'Cause words have lost their meaning, and I'm trapped inside a dream where we turn the gears while living in the spaces in between.
I know you hated being forced awake. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say.
Poor thing.
I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
My dial doesn't go to delicate. I'm writing for when Biden drops and Madam Zero delegates come stumbling up the podium, square peg in her element, popping OxyContin like they're velements, laughing as she pawns off all our pensions for Ukrainian development, depleted rounds and cluster bombs, the shit that stunts development, all buried under excrement, accepted as American intelligence. A contradiction in its eloquence. Terms of surrender penned by hands that felt the threat of disconnect, if not dismemberment. Oh, what little proof you have to fake to make a nation love the bomb and change its tune and warp its temperament. Oh, the dues you'll pay for NATO membership. Oh, the things you'll say that no one's ever gonna hear. 'Cause you begged for all the censorship, and now it's finally here. And you're tongueless out of terror.
Have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously,
No.
we're fucked. We are
Right.
fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Smoke them if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
INN News.
Yeah, we did it.
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
About how a lot of people are feeling today.
I'm gonna come.
Yeah,
what? Sorry.
Yeah, the Chino man is back. Yeah. So, hey everyone.
Don't be rude.
Don't do
yeah,
it.
we're gonna hear. I forgot. We actually started INN News towards the first year, into the first year of Biden, so we didn't need to hear much of Trump. So now, you're gonna put in a lot more Trump clips, I'm sure, sound bites, I'm sure.
The light of America's promise will always burn bright.
Remember, Collin, it'll burn bright.
For her, maybe, but not for the rest of us. So just as a quick aside, so I don't want to say where I live exactly. I will say what quadrant. I live in Northwest DC.
Yeah.
Howard University is in that quadrant. So Kamala, as you know, she was going to give her victory party at Howard last night, but obviously, due to the impending doom of what is now a Trump presidency, which we surprisingly did learn about fairly quickly, she decided to give her closing speech till just earlier tonight. So it's been kind of odd, I would say, today. Although I think the good thing is being in this space, we knew, I think we've been kind of preparing ourselves for the worst in light of our reporting, and then obviously our colleagues who have been doing great work in kind of collecting data and then analyzing it, and I think just reading the tea leaves a lot better than a lot of these mainstream pundits who are paid to do this for real, and they couldn't even get it right. So so
I don't care.
There obviously were some down spirits today. I don't think as gloom and doom as it was back in 2016, but the feelings were there all the same. And regardless, we're going to be here.
Mhm.
We're going to continue
Ain't nothing changes
giving you
for
the
us,
news.
pretty much.
Right.
So,
But
I'm sorry.
it will change for many people in our lives to, just obviously with a
yeah, they're going to be in
second
their
term of
fields
Trump.
for a minute. They'll get over it.
But I think it's more of a question now. I think especially like what we're going to do moving forward. So, just I'm sure many of you have friends and family who may be possibly very upset. So do your best to be there for them at least for the next week or so. Obviously be kind, but we're the reality of our politics is shit. You know this. We report about it, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of analysis moving forward, and we're going to start that a little bit tonight. But obviously, people are hurting, so be there for the people that in your lives are not doing so well, and do your best to be there for them.
Yeah, try to help them understand. I think that's the thing. Knowledge is power in that sense.
Well, I think it's just more in terms of whether or not they understand or not, but I think it's the idea of like, how do we move forward?
Yeah.
Like in a practical, but at the same time, realistic way and meaningful way so that we won't get caught with the seat off our pants again.
Speaking of moving forward, because we got some splaining to do. We're gonna have to call it the same powers that be that actually control the figureheads in power. We brought some stories.
Right.
We're gonna try to
And
avoid the standard election coverage everyone else did. So
right. That being
I'm
said,
sure
we
people are
are
tired
going.
of
We
it.
do have. We do have a couple. So this might be a long stream. So
Yeah, buckle up, folks.
We'll try. Right. So depending on length, we might not do a couple. We'll see. But as Reef said, we don't want to. I mean, there have been a lot of channels that really went into it last night. We don't want to necessarily add to that. That being said, we will give a little bit of an analysis, but not to the degree that everyone else will. We'll talk about that later. But as far as the actual stories that we did prepare, and we have a few more that we kind of prepared offhandedly, and then one that's kind of breaking that we might get to at the end. But obviously, Trump is now a thing. The biggest thing that people were more worried about, is his dealing with Israel.
This is the most election of our lifetime.
And now that he's pretty much the man that is going to be our leader again, come January, that is going to be a big conversation. So the question that we're going to be asking is, how will Trump defend Israel from future protests? Since now, as I say, people become more animated and more of an activist whenever the Republican is in office. So given what we know in Gaza, like, will more people be activated to, turn around this genocide that is occurring? So we're going to give some information as to how Trump feels about Israel. I think a lot of you already know, but giving you some details that might guide his thinking as he heads into office within the next couple of months. And then later on tonight, this has been an issue, and shout out to Angel Himbo Crab, who were on Kit's election coverage stream last night. You guys kind of talked about this a little bit in your stream with him. And shout out to Indy for actually sharing the story with me from Politico regarding broken voter machines that I think, we often talk about this pretty much every time we vote. But just some information, just given how faulty many of them are, which leads into election integrity that I know a lot of our people in the space have been talking about for years. So we are going to break that down a little bit later on tonight. And then, what did you bring, Reef?
Well, I didn't want to cover election stuff, so I brought like 3 things that weren't that. I figured everyone had about enough, and real things are happening. So, I wanted to bring some more nightmare fuel, as I tend to do on this show, unfortunately. We're going to talk about some facial recognition in warfare and what that might be doing in Gaza. Not great. It's going to spoil alert. Not great. And we're going to talk about this clandestine publishing. You asked me what that was yesterday, and we'll get more into it. But we've talked about self-publishing as a way of actually reaching people and getting around censorship. We've spoken to the Uhuru people, and that's what they do, right? They have their own newsletter, things like that.
Basically, yeah.
So we're going to get into that and some of the historical ways that that's actually been useful. Shout out Vanessa Beeley, who shared this story. So if you're not following Vanessa, go do so. You'll learn about stuff like this. So, or follow us, one of the two. We got plenty of places to do that at. Down in the description, you can find all our links. They're right there at indienewsnetwork if you need to know. But anyway, I also got extra story about women's health, seeing as how that's going to be a factor coming forward. So stay tuned for that.
Right.
But yeah, you ready? I'm ready.
Yeah. So actually, we'll begin. We won't start with the Trump story yet. I actually bought, actually probably 2 extra stories, but this is the first one. You kind of pulled this up for me last night as we were getting ready. So, and it basically turned into what I thought might be a react, might probably turn into a segment in of itself. So,
Unity doesn't represent what you're against. It represents what you are for.
So we haven't talked about our patron saint on this show for a while. Those of you who know, in the know, we loved Kwame Ture here. And actually, funny enough, we're actually going to feature some of what he says regarding the Democratic Party. You actually hear it in our intro basically every week. We're going to listen to the whole thing. But you pulled this clip in particular, given during the election last night as we were prepping. Which I think is very interesting considering what I share with people today. And I think this also relates to, obviously, thinking in terms of this election, people around the world are watching to see the outcome, and we know the outcome, and it may not be a good thing in terms of how the rest of the world may view us again in terms of having Trump president again. So, but you pulled this for me in relation to what Kwame Ture has said regarding our society in terms of the bullshit that we do here. So let's see what Robert Ture says here.
The American society, being as technologically capable as it is, able to do so much good, can keep its people so confused. The people all over the world hate the American people. They hate you. And what is pathetic about it is that you don't even know why they hate you, and you think they shouldn't be hating you. But if you examine it, they have every reason to be hating you because you are irresponsible to humanity. Look at the people in Iran. The guns that are used against those people are paid for with your tax dollars.
Still are.
The guns that are used to oppress these people, impose a Shah, is paid for with your tax dollars. Your tax dollars is helping to crush humanity.
Still are.
I say you must take some responsibility. Everything in the world relates to everything else. Everything is interconnected to everything else.
Shit, where have we heard that before, Colin?
Yeah.
You mean foreign policy is domestic policy is foreign policy is domestic policy?
Right. We share that on the show all the time. But yeah, I think this is very interesting that, and and part of the truth that you kind of shared in talking with your friends, I had to kind of break that down to some of them today. It's the idea of like, look, I understand why you're upset, but at the same time, you know, you can't be any more upset compared to how people in Gaza might be feeling, compared to how people in Congo might be feeling, compared to how people in the Sudan might be thinking, in Iran and now in Lebanon, you know, all because of our policies that affect these countries. That, yeah, like, is our concerns not any more important? Sure, but like, compared to the idea of, again, with Gaza, the idea of being genocided, we don't necessarily have to worry about that here. Yeah, like, not to say our issues are not going to be worse now under Trump, given now that he will have more than likely full control of government under the Republican Party. It's not going to be much compared to what people in the global South have been going through, regardless of who's in office.
Right.
So I think just kind of looking at it from that perspective, you know, it just kind of really shows how, and I've shared this with you a lot, especially over the last 2 weeks, how I think really selfish we are in this country, and how we choose to isolate ourselves from the rest of the world in terms of what we're going through, or what they're going through rather, and not necessarily relate to the idea that our policies affect other people around the world, and being around the world enough, having the understanding of, while they might like American people, people generally, like, wherever you go, generally do not like our politics in terms of how our politics affect them. So moving on, you also brought up this clip. I mean, and as I said earlier, this is a clip. If you listen to the show every week, you hear this clip every week. But this is the full clip of why Kwame mentions how he doesn't participate in essentially the duopoly. So
it's the W.E.B. Du Bois too, which we've covered his take on voting before as well. So,
right.
You know, but yeah.
So let's actually listen to the whole thing, and then we'll chat.
If you look at the Africans in the Democratic Party, now I'm not a Democrat. I've never voted in my life in the Democratic Party, and I never vote in the Democratic Party. It's racist and it's capitalist to the core.
Smart man.
This is understood. And I shed my blood. I shed my blood for the vote now. I want to make that clear. Some people get confused. The vote for me has never been the road to liberation. It's only the means of organizing my people. I know that. I was a young man in Harlem when they disbarred Adam Clayton Powell. Harlem had no representation. We continued to eat and sleep and take drugs and continue life just like always when Julian Bond was elected, when we were young in SNCC in Atlanta, Georgia, and they refused to see them because of the position against the war in Vietnam. The Africans in that area, his congressional district, continued life just as we've not been having any mayors, and we've been having life, and even with the mayors now, the quality of life has not improved at all. So I've known the vote is never what? You vote for once in 4 years, and that's your political responsibility? That's the height of bourgeois propaganda, making the people politically irresponsible, thinking their irresponsibility is limited to a one-day vote. Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on, not voting on one day. So the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat. But one thing is clear. Jesse Jackson, undeniably, has done more for the Democratic Party than any other African in this country. This is an objective fact. More than Ron Brown, certainly. More than Vernon Jordan, certainly. For the Democratic Party, I'm speaking. Because every African that Jesse registers is, by definition, an African. I understood this even in my early days for SNCC. I said, look, we're working for the Democratic Party. I said, I don't do that. Yeah, I'm a revolutionary. I can't work for the Democratic Party. But every African you registered is voting Democrat. That's the rule. So this man, Clinton, comes to power and thinks that he can decide which African he will deal with. He gonna get his own Africans. He thinks he's gonna tell us which African he's gonna impose upon us. I say, I'm not a member of the Democratic Party, but I know if Jesse Jackson has less power than every other African Democrat in this country, he has more influence over voting Democrats than any other African in the country.
Well,
I mean, yeah, I mean, well, here's the thing. And I've been hearing this too, like, for people, especially given Gaza, like the argument that people were making to vote for Kamala, for example, was you're not voting as to way to acknowledge what she's doing. It's a way to pressure her,
allegedly,
in a matter of speaking,
yeah,
to push her, which I will, well, for me, I'm kind of like, well, I would not be opposed to the idea, but given recent history, how effective is that if you give away your very currency that they need in order to validate the illusion of choice that we have, and once they get it, you know, you lose your leverage. So, and I've said this many times on this show, your vote's your leverage, you know? So it's the idea of like, you don't want to just give it away willy-nilly. Like, you need to hang on to it until you get the actual tangibles that you need. Because once they get it, and especially given in this case the idea of a genocide in Gaza, or you could pick whatever topic or issue that you value, you know, once you give it away, you know, you lose your leverage. And then politicians, especially with how bought they are,
which I'd argue you don't got no leverage anyway, you know?
right.
Like at this point.
But not now. But
yeah.
But the idea of like using your vote as a way to push them, I don't think it doesn't make sense to me at all. But
didn't do
how
shit.
Kwame mentions it is a vote is a way that you should organize, which I could also see that. But even with that, my thing is, and it's going to be interesting now that we're going to have Trump as president again.
Keep in mind that was when? Like, when did he say that?
Well, he was talking about Jackson. 19... So this was in the 80s.
Right, yeah. So
70, well, Clinton, so early 90s, I would guess.
Right. So like, and I don't even think he means that it's a way of organizing his people. And it sounded like he didn't even feel like that was how he should be organizing people. Right. Like that's how other people try to organize my people, you know?
Right. And
like,
but that makes sense given, and this has been the frustration that I've had. It's the idea of the intentions of people, especially who are organizing. Like a lot of organizers are not going in with the radical mindset of, working from within the outside. If anything, many of them are trying to work within the concept of electoralism, which is what Kwame essentially is describing what Jesse Jackson was trying to do, trying to build a coalition that will essentially become loyal to the Democratic Party. And given, even with exit polls that we're seeing from this election last night, Obama chastised Black men for, being weary, and rightly so, for wanting to vote for Kamala. Black people in general still, I think the numbers I saw were probably around in the 90s, at least with Black people voting for Kamala.
Come on,
so,
people.
Right. Whereas, other races went more heavily for Trump. So even with that,
Do you think that if Nancy Pelosi wore more kente cloth, they'd have gotten more votes?
No.
Okay. Just making sure.
No. No, but
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Democracy simply doesn't work.
But it's it's the intent behind the organizing, and I've said this on the show. I think I might have said it as early as last week. Now I'm very skeptical now in terms of who I organize with.
Yep.
I got burned in 2020 in terms of, during George Floyd, and actually thinking like things might actually be in play in terms of the needs of Black people in this country that were actually being listened to for once, and people actually seemingly, genuinely were more interested and willing to be on the streets. But again, that was during Trump. But then once the moment that Biden won, everyone kind of dusted their hands and they went about their merry way. And
The hoes be knowing.
right. And so for me, it was just kind of like, it's like, why are you going home? The struggle is not over, So, and it's going to be interesting that I think people are going to be more activated again because it's Trump. But that's the thing that I'm kind of frustrated with. It's the idea of when you feel that your rights are being in crisis, then you're more willing to do something. But when you're comfortable, then you feel like you're able to take a back seat. And that's not the idea of policy. It's the idea we've said again on this show that even if you get it, you have to kind of keep at them to make sure that that doesn't get taken away. Like once you get a policy implemented, the powers that be are going to look to try to get rid of it. So you have to kind of be on them. But the thing is, I think once we get it, we kind of think we're done. And so, which kind of goes into what Kwame was saying here, is that you have to think politically all the time. You have to essentially strategize all the time. So, but we tend to go take a break. And I feel like in the last 4 years, many people have taken a break from the activism that I believe that they should have been doing all along. So I think that's been my frustration, is like the come what latelys. Like,
well, and my frustration is those same people. Like, this is a great opportunity for controlled ops to like whitewash themselves, to get new one of those in, to there's a lot of like, you watch Game of Thrones once or twice.
I haven't.
There's a famous saying in it, chaos is a ladder, right? Where it's like, all of this change of power and, change of dynamic will allow for like more subterfuge to take place underneath things, So that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about ops to opping,
Yeah.
But that's going to be for us to try to sort through. And I just ask people to stay more vigilant than they would be, be a little more discerning, especially with where you get your information and with who you entertain yourself with,
Right. Which actually goes into the next clip that Kwame talked about in terms of, who like being, I think, a little bit more discerning in terms of who you organize with or who you align yourself with.
Yeah.
In terms of getting the liberation that you seek. So let's listen to that clip and then we'll follow up from there.
Our problem has been, as Black people, we've always been concerned about white America, never about us. And what we've always thought is that white America equal the same interest as us. That is not true. We must now be concerned with us. Let me give you some examples. We always want to prove what good Americans we are. The very first man to die for the War of Independence in this country was a black man named Crispus Attucks. Crispus Attucks. He was a fool. Because here he was dying for white folk freedom, and millions of his brothers were enslaved in the very country. Oh, but we wanted to prove what great Americans we were. We begged the white folk to let us fight in the War of Independence, And they said no. So we organized ourselves in bands of armies, training ourselves with our bare foot to prove to the white folk what great Americans we were. Please let us fight, white folk. And finally they came and inspected our troops and said, good niggas, you can fight. And they had us fighting the Indians. Like fools, we should have teamed up with the Indians and take care of you know who.
Yeah. And I
Well-
think, especially within the Black community, especially with the Black bourgeoisie, that's what we're seeing. Like, we want to be closer to, we want to have a seat at the table, which is like a proxy of white supremacy, but not necessarily team up with the people that we should be organizing with to take on the supremacy.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting that I'm hearing people kind of talking in that more radical language within the last 24 hours, but we
Yeah.
should have had that attitude, you know, all along. So, but regardless, so thank you for sharing those clips
You're
with us
welcome.
tonight. But I do want to end this segment with, like we said, we don't want to talk about the election really tonight. I mean, there have been plenty of our colleagues who've shared ad nauseum about it last night. You can check out their streams or whatever. You know where to go. But I do want to end with this because I think this kind of surmises a little bit of what Kwame was talking about. But I think this, to me, I think is the best analysis of how we got here. So I believe you read an article from Jason Hickel
Once or twice,
last
I think.
week, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've definitely read a couple of his articles on his show. So I think I caught this morning, which I think he surmises where we're at right now, I think, very well. So on Twitter, he tweeted, all of it takes regarding the election are correct, and yet they also miss the point. Yes, it was insane for the Democrats to think they could win by running a soulless candidate without a shred of progressive policy vision, pursuing endorsements from neocon war hawks everyone hates, while arming and funding a genocide, and belittling and crushing those who have enough morality to protest it. It is enraging that the Democrats are so smug and blind to this. But these are all just symptoms. The deeper reality is that liberalism has failed, liberalism is dead, and people urgently need to wake up to this fact and respond accordingly. It is a defunct ideology that cannot offer any meaningful solutions to our social and ecological crises, and it must be abandoned. Can you scroll down, please?
Yes.
Democrats have proven over and over again that they cannot accept even basic steps like public health care, affordable housing, and a public job guarantee, things that would dramatically improve the material, social, and political conditions of the working classes. And they cannot accept a public finance strategy that would steer production away from fossil fuels and toward green transition to give us a shot at a livable future. Why? Because these things run against the objectives of capital accumulation. And for liberals, capital is sacrosanct. They will do whatever it takes to ensure elite accumulation. It is their only consistent commitment. At home, they suppress and demonize progressive and socialist tendencies. Abroad, they engage in endless wars and violence to suppress input prices in the global south and prevent any possibility of sovereign economic development.
Capitalism.
Scroll out. Oh.
There you go.
The Democrats have done all this purposely and knowingly for my whole life, not as some kind of mistake, but in full consciousness that is in the interest of capital. And because liberalism cannot address our crises, and because it crushes socialist alternatives, it inevitably paves the way for right-wing populism. They know this pattern, and yet they risk it every time. This election being one of the most recent examples. They did it in 2016 when they actively crushed the Sanders campaign and sent Trump to the White House. They do it because ultimately they, and I mean the liberal ruling class here, don't really mind if fascists take power so long as the latter too ensure the condition for capital accumulation. they 100% prefer this to the possibility of a socialist alternative. So progressives have to face reality. The dream of converting the Democratic Party is dead. This is now a fact and it must be accepted. The only option is to build a mass-based movement that can reclaim the working classes and mobilize a political vehicle that can integrate disparate progressive struggles into a unified and formidable political force and achieve substantive transformation. This will take real work, actual organizing, but it must be done, and that process must begin now. And I put this in here because
years ago, you know?
Right. Well, that's the argument. This should have happened years ago. But we've been forced, and I think even within the independent media space, like definitely around 2016, you know, Justice Democrats comes to mind of the idea of, oh, we just need to elect the right people to get into office and they'll fight on our behalf. And we've seen
that
hasn't worked.
Stop engaging with politicians as a way to enact change. It has not fucking worked. Like, and I'm looking at you, particular pink people, either particular pink people you want to use, the hat ones or the other ones. They all engage politicians to try to enact change, and you shouldn't do that. You know,
so
make them come to you, if anything. Like, organize around actual issues and show up for those specifically. You know, like, it's tough, man. So
it's tough, but you know, but overall, well, we'll see. But I think just given what happened last night, I think I do want to end with some hope, you know, me being as cynical as I am regarding politics. I do want to think that this might, in a way, I'm looking forward to a Trump presidency in a sense, given that I think it will be, the ground will be ripe to actually have those conversations. And I think at minimum, people will be more willing to try an alternative route apart from electoralism. Whether or not that will pan out into something a little more meaningful, who knows? But I think at least, I think people will be more willing to entertain the idea now, given like what we've tried within the last 8 plus, well, actually longer than that now, 12 years now, especially in the independent media space. We tried with Justice Democrats, that hasn't worked. We've tried with actual like protesting, that hasn't worked, you know, and so we need to do something else. And I think the only way that we can do that, and I hate even saying this in this way, is organize, but organize with the right people that really have your best interests in mind, that will not sell you off when their rights are like challenged, that they were able to stand for you in terms of what you need in addition to theirs, so that we're able to seek the true liberation that we're all looking for. So yeah, I think,
and organize with people who can
be
sharpen a guillotine, but that's just me.
Right.
Inflatable ones. Inflatable guillotine. Don't worry about it. Inflatable.
But yeah, this is why we're demonetized, because we talk about stuff like this, and YouTube doesn't like us for talking about stuff like this. So if you want to help to kind of help us continue to talk more about these conversations, especially moving forward into the next year, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the link that you see at the bottom of your screen to help give us a donation on Ko-fi. Any amount helps, even as much as $1. We know that, especially now we're in the holiday season, things are going to be a little tighter, getting gifts and food and all that kind of stuff. So as we always say, take care of your families, take care of your friends, take care of your communities first. But if you have the means to give to us, we really do appreciate it.
Money, please.
And along with that, don't forget to like and subscribe, and please share our stream or our clips to help fight the suppression on YouTube, because they hate us and they've told us that they're not going to push our work at all. So I make sure to leave a comment. They say it helps with the algorithm, but we do read them, and we definitely do get some ideas as far as stories from you. So please let us know whether you like. And in this case, how do you feel about this upcoming election, and what do you think our future looks like? What we should be doing in terms of moving forward in light of a very oppressive environment that we're going to be heading into, for sure. And help us get to free K so that we're able to grow and we're able to have more people tune into our content. And thanks for watching.
Cool. All right. Well, people filing in, Miss Witchy Perfect and the Handsome Cynic, aka Angel, over on the Kick. Go check out their stuff over on the weekends. They do some wrestling stuff if you're into that. But Miss Witchy Perfect says, here, rich dicks, aka politicians, do not like poor people and will not help you. Yep.
No.
Makes perfect sense to me. So I'm going to pull us back to the beginning of this other story for you.
Yeah.
I will link, if you want to follow us on other platforms, specifically if, YouTube decides to kick us off, you can always find us on your Rumbles. Put that in the link for people. Also, all the links to all the network channels are indienewsnetwork. You can find all our stuff there. But yeah. All right, you ready for the next one?
Yep.
Cool.
So we're actually going to start with our true first segment. So as all of you know by now, Trump is our president-elect. So he won the election very convincingly last night. But one of the issues that people were trying to make the case in terms of voting for Kamala would be that Trump would be much worse in terms of the issue in Gaza and in the Middle East in general. So, but we're going to take a look into that a little bit as to how will he defend Israel from those who will potentially protest moving forward, especially within the next couple of months.
You are fake news.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I pulled this from Consortium News. This is written by Joe Lauria. There's actually a report that he pulled up where he writes, Trump plans a UK-style attack on Israel criticism. So what does that mean? Joe Lauria says the Heritage Foundation's Project Esther, as covered by Drop Site News, replicates the UK's use of a terrorism law to criminalize pro-Palestine speech and activism. So let's see what this project actually entails. A second Trump administration could criminalize criticism of Israel's genocide in Gaza as support for terrorism, along the lines of the British Terrorism Act, according to a report in Drop Site News. The report says the plan is to break up the pro-Palestinian movement in the U.S. Can you move your screen?
Yeah. How about you do that?
That's fine.
That's better.
Thank you. The plan, Project Esther, casts pro-Palestinian activists in the U.S. as members of a global conspiracy aligned with designated terrorist organizations. As part of a so-called Hamas support network, these protesters receive indispensable support of a vast network of activists and funders with a much more ambitious, insidious goal: the destruction of capitalism and democracy. Project Esther's authors allege.
Capitalism.
This conspiratorial framing is part of a legal strategy to suppress speech favorable to Palestinians or critical of the U.S.-Israel relationship by employing counterterrorism laws to suppress what would otherwise be protected speech, legal experts told Dropsite News.
Too far.
Yeah. The authors of the plan are part of the right-wing Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, Dropsite says. President-elect Donald Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 25, but he is a strong supporter of Israel, having moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem and accepted Israel's annexation of Syria's Golan Heights, considered illegal by the UN Security Council. The Washington Post reported in May that Trump told donors in New York that he would deport foreign students if they demonstrate for Palestine. One thing I do is, any student that protests, I throw them out of the country. You know, there are a lot of foreign students. As soon as they hear that, they're going to behave. Trump told the donors, the Post reported. The report in Dropsite News, written by, we will not say his name, Murtaza Hussein, quotes an attorney at Palestine Legal as saying that concepts like the Hamas Support Network or Hamas supporting organizations, another term that the authors use to describe pro-Palestinian activist groups, is intended to construct a narrative justifying the use of counterterrorism and sanction laws to suppress the First Amendment rights of individuals involved in the pro-Palestinian movement. They need to make a claim that these organizations are being directed and controlled by Hamas, which they are not, attorney Dylan Saba said. So their claim now is that these organizations are effectively serving as a propaganda wing for designated terrorist organizations. This is precisely what the British government has been doing.
Yep.
Using the 2000 Terrorism Act, authorities have been stopping journalists and activists at border entry points to interrogate them, sometimes arresting them, or conducting raids on their homes, all because they dare expose and condemn Israel's ongoing barbarism in Gaza and now Lebanon, and misconstrue it as support for proscribed organizations, mainly Hamas and Hezbollah. Sounds like what happened to Jeremy Lafredo very recently from Rayzone, as well as
and also go check out Phantom Parrot if you've not seen our coverage of that. Very, very useful information to know about the UK's Terrorism Act. So, but yeah.
Among those interrogated under the Terrorism Act for this purpose has been another person that we feature, Craig Murray, writer for former British diplomat, New Consortium News board member, journalist Richard Renhurst, who was held in a cell for 24 hours, and Isa Winstanley, an editor at the Electronic Intifada, whose home was raided by counterterrorism police. If Trump wins, we could expect the same thing as is happening in the UK from his second administration, according to Dropsite News. To achieve its goals, Project Esther proposes the use of counterterrorism and hate speech laws, as well as immigration measures, including the deportation of students and other individuals, Dropsite News reported. The draconian measures being planned also include using racketeering laws to help construct prosecutions against individuals and organizations in the movement, the site reported. The project would first attempt to purge propaganda from schools, then intimidate students not to take part in protests, which that's been happening already.
We're going to get to it again later tonight. So,
right. This process is expected to lead to a point where both the U.S. public and preponderance of Jewish community perceive HSOs, short for Hamas support organizations, as a threat to their safety. Their aim is to crush the anti-genocide movement within 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, about that.
Zoom out.
You want me to go up here, don't you?
Sure. As with most things in the duopoly, the Biden administration has given Trump a head start by designating a Palestinian prisoner support group named Samidun a terrorist organization, the site says. Israel has been accusing any critic of being pro-Hamas, such as how they smeared UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, or they accuse you of being part of Hamas. What is even more disturbing is that Western governments have taken up these ludicrous claims to ensure Israel remains above criticism while it openly commits genocide. It is one of the most transparent tricks going back a millennia for a government to smear its legitimate critics as being card-carrying members of its most ardent enemies, and Western governments are willingly falling for it, criminalizing journalists who oppose the slaughter.
Yep.
If Trump has won and follows through with this plan, he will totally abrogating the First Amendment, which is supposed to separate the U.S. from the country it rebelled against a long time ago.
A long time ago. Yeah, he don't give a shit about free speech, dog.
No.
I love how people think that. Not necessarily. I mean, I think it's you know, we're getting into his money ties to Israel in a second, but yeah, I think it's one of those things where I don't see it much different than what Biden's administration was willing to do. You know,
Right.
We don't know exactly who will be in his cabinet moving forward, but if Pompeo has anything to do with it,
Right.
or
And this is something actually I'm glad you brought this up because it's something I shared on Twitter, I think yesterday. Like, 'cause
RFK and
people
Rabbi
were like, "Oh, wait,
Shmuley have
that's-"
anything to do with it.
Right.
You know?
But then it's the idea of like when you're voting for like the president in this case, you're not just voting for them, you're voting for people within their cabinet,
Yeah.
which we do not have any control over. So the idea that all these swamp monsters are basically going to be advising now Trump or Kamala into doing bad shit is something that I think you should be more scared of because we don't have control over that in terms of voting for these people. But these are the people that are tied to the establishment, who are tied to the Israeli lobby, who are going to make these decisions and will break everything as far within our constitution to ensure that whatever they don't like or whatever they want to suppress will come about. So yeah, obviously with Trump, that's one we know what he's gonna get, but like, or we can guess. With Kamala, it would have been the same thing too. You know, given that she's tied to Wall Street, she's tied to these big donors, and she's definitely tied to AIPAC. So, you know, it's the idea of like, who are the people surrounding the presidents who are going to be advising them / suggesting things that don't hurt the empire. It's something that I don't think people consider. But the idea that, you know, even for Kamala, you know, having Liz Cheney being BFFs with her, it's kind of like, why would you be willing to have someone who I said that like her father who was considered Satan, like when I was in my 20s and made fun of, you know, I remember, you know, basically everyone saying he was running the show over Bush. So, but you're willing to work with this woman because she somewhat had a Jesus moment being a part of the party that was, you know, now MAGA. Okay. So something that people don't necessarily think about as far as, you know, who you select or vote in, that these are the people that are also a part of the cabinet that we do not, there's no democracy there. So, you
and
know,
the money is all over it. Peter Thiel,
remember Obama.
gonna be bad, you know.
Right. And remember Obama picked his cabinet from Citigroup.
Citigroup. They're gonna be the same people practically, you know.
Right.
So, like, we'll see how that works.
So you pull this up for me,
Yes, sir.
just to add a little more spice to this article. So this is from Loki, who is correspondent for Mint Press News. So he tweeted earlier today, it looks like U.S. President Donald Trump will seek to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank. We've talked a bit about the West Bank, how they're planning to annex it in addition to Gaza. This threat examines the possibility and those around him pushing for it. Trump's presidential campaign was bankrolled by Israel lobbyist Miriam Allison, the widow of casino billionaire Sheldon Adelson.
Yep.
One of her demands of Trump was a recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank.
Yep.
We actually
giving her
talked about that story regarding
French
the
tongue
settler
back?
movement in the West Bank last week, if you want to check out that segment. I think it's up on our page now, if it won't be by tomorrow. Trump's relationship with the late Sheldon Adelson went back many decades. Adelson pumped hundreds of millions into AIPAC, birthright, illegal settlements in the West Bank, and even the failed political campaign of Rabbi Shmuley. Both Trump and Adelson's names are included on a list of individuals that Benjamin Netanyahu considers to be funders of his political campaign. So,
Yep, and we've covered this script before in relation to Piers Morgan, right?
Right.
But the guy who runs Piers Morgan and bought him out, I do believe, is in that list, right?
John Sawyers, the former head of MI6, described Donald Trump as the most easily manipulated U.S. president Israel has ever enjoyed. He recognized Israel's illegal annexation of the Syrian Golan Heights, which no other country has done. Trump's proposals for a solution to Palestine were largely written by the Israelis. Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir had today heralded Trump's victory as the time for sovereignty and complete victory. Whatever Trump does elsewhere, watch the West Bank. So we will definitely do that, especially given, now Trump is president. We'll definitely update you guys and probably report a lot more on the West Bank, hopefully in the next few months, to see what comes out with that. But any final thoughts before we close this segment?
Not really. I mean, to me, it's par for the course for those paying attention. He's definitely going to be in bed with Israel.
Right.
So they don't let you into that office without you being willing to play ball there. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, the difference is with Trump, he's very open. He basically says to us what he plans to do. It's not like the Democrats weren't doing this as well. They were just doing a better job of not mentioning it at all. But it's still happening.
I'll look for it. It was a good quote.
Do you remember who it was from?
Yes. Vanessa Beeley says, "Gone is a genocidal president, too hypocritical to admit it, and in comes a genocidal president who wears it as a badge of honor." Dr. Ghassan Abu Sita is the quote. So I felt like
the fact that Kamala denied that a genocide is taking place.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Trump hasn't said that, but he's level the place.
Yeah.
And again, I
It
argue,
was a debate.
and I argue Biden and Harris already gave him a head start. The place is leveled. So there's not much more that Trump has to complete. But there's more to Gaza. We might try and we got breaking story in relation to all of this too. So if we have time tonight, we'll talk about it. But yeah, I think that's all I got for that story, at least.
Well, boop. There it is.
Yeah.
Well, talking about these things is why we're demonetized. So you can scan that QR code on your screen. Go to code-fee.com/indienewsnetwork. Our links are always in the little doobly-doo down below. But if you can't give monetarily, just like and subscribe. Share this with your friends. There's going to be a lot of those people who need to be catching up. So make sure to do that and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. How bad's it going to be? But otherwise, thanks for watching. Cool. All right. Before we get to that one, you want to take a look at chats?
Yep.
All quiet on the Rumble front. Miss Witchy Perfect has a head out on Kick, but she says Trump is not going to stop the genocide. Extra B on that stop. But anything on YouTube?
Max Sarjay said you can buy free speech from Elon.
Yeah, just like you can buy real fruit and Fruit Loops. You know, like that ain't no free speech, dog. But anyway, all right. Might as well keep it moving.
Yeah.
Let's head to our next one. So, Collin, they face exploitation, but also their faces are exploited. You're going to find out how. Found this article, thought it was very important, and I expect the reason it's going to be coming here, you know, if it's not already. But I think the implications are a little more terrifying than we think. So let's get into it. So this is Taraksi Hajjaj over at SheerPost, who writes, witnesses say the Israeli army is using facial recognition technology in its assault on North Gaza, as it's been doing frequently. We've already covered at like checkpoints and whatnot, right? For a while.
Correct.
But we're going to get into the nitty gritty of it. So the army made the men stand in front of the camera for at least 3 minutes per person, Al-Dawar said, long enough for the cameras to scan their faces and reveal personal data seemingly already stored in the Israeli military system. After the scans, Al-Dawar said, the soldiers would reveal information about each individual, including their name, age, work, family members, and names, places of residence, and even their personal activities. We're going to get to that. Hold on to that. When they suspected someone, they took him away to an unknown location, Al-Dawar said. As for those who had relatives who belonged to Palestinian resistance movements or who personally belonged to resistance factions, Al-Dawar speculated that their fate was immediate death. What does that sound like to you, Collin? Sound familiar?
Genocide?
I mean, it sounds
like
very...
Holocaust?
Sounds like fucking Spielberg wrote a movie about this nonsense. You know?
Right.
Well, one people get one line, the other people get the other line. Which line do you want to be in? Like, where's that little fucking, you know, only girl with red dresses and whatnot on, huh? Where's that at? All right, no one knows Schindler's List, just me. But, so, citing stories he had heard from others in Gaza whose friends and relatives were taken at checkpoints and had not been seen again or returned to Gaza body bags. Al-Dawar is one of the thousands of people who were expelled from the Jabaliya refugee camp in northern Gaza in order to move south at gunpoint by the Israeli army. The forced exodus of thousands out of Jabaliya is part of the Israeli offensive on northern Gaza that started on October 5th. Its objective is to implement a proposal put forward by a group of senior Israeli generals that aims to empty northern Gaza of its inhabitants through starvation and bombardment, the so-called General's Plan. We covered that not too long ago, right? Where they're pushing them into Egypt. I think that's Israel's secret plan, right? Not so secret when they tell everybody, though, is it? Survivors from Jabalia, like Al-Dawar, report that the Israeli army is using facial recognition technology to screen residents in the ongoing assault, often identifying people from long distances and picking them out from a crowd. Survivors from Jabalia, like Al-Dawar, report that the IOF is using facial recognition technology to screen... I just read that, didn't I? Witnesses say that the Israeli army has set up security checkpoints throughout northern Gaza where the facial recognition technology is being deployed. The military is also reporting using this technology when it storms shelters for the displaced. Witnesses report that in these cases, Israeli forces will corral people in enclosed places using ditches dug by military bulldozers and process them individually. Mondowai spoke to several survivors from Jabalia who said that the Israeli army is using quadcopter drones to identify people immediately from a distance, and that soldiers are stopping people at checkpoint to conduct camera scans that last for several minutes. Witnesses say that these were particularly unnerving as they stood awaiting an uncertain fate. Witnesses also report that the army picked people out of a crowd at checkpoints using what they described as a red laser pointer that was either mounted on a tank or on a soldier's rifle. Witnesses told Mondo Weiss that after the army scans people's faces, most people are detained for field interrogations. During these encounters, soldiers use what Ishaq al-Daur described as psychological tactics to unsettle the people being questioned, claiming that they know everything about their lives, and if they lie in their answers, they will be killed. The questions are typically wide-ranging, al-Daur said. They ask us about our relatives, our neighbors, the movements of the resistance fighters on the ground, who we know from them, and who they are. They convince us that they already know everything about us by mentioning intimate details about our lives, and then they threaten us with killing if we lie. So, thoughts so far, Care Bear?
I mean, this kind of reminds me of when I go through custom.
Worse?
Yeah,
way worse.
But I think no, but I feel that, I mean, it's not to say that the technology is not in place already, but I feel like we have the prototype of it already in place here. Because, and I'll just share, like, prior to me becoming a U.S. citizen, I was on a green card, and when I was living in Boston, I would fly. There's only one airport, so you would fly into like Boston Logan if I was going home. And there was a point for like maybe about 5 or 6 years, I would travel on average like once a year, usually abroad, whether it was to Africa or like home to London or both. And there was this one agent, like every time that I will get off the plane to go through customs, I would always get this guy for some odd reason. And he will always, it always felt like he asked me a few more extra questions than necessary. Like even, you know, the questions like, where did you go? How long were you there? What did you do? Like, a little more personal that I wouldn't get into here. But it always just felt very like weird. So yeah, so it just kind of reminds me of that, as you said, but a lot. But then I think especially now with everything going digital, like the fact that I can use my phone with the face ID in order to open it and like
keep
pay
in mind
and all that kind of stuff. It's like
how much data that can be tied to that, right?
Right.
So
right.
You know, that's essentially what.
So they have access to your credit card. They have access to your accounts. They probably have access to
all your socials,
you're searching online on socials and social media and all that kind of stuff. So no,
which we covered.
Far-fetched.
Israel being literally using AI stuff to do that as well. But I wanted to kind of showcase what this actually means in practice. Right. So I found this video from January 31st, right? So been happening for a minute, as we all know. But this is them using this facial recognition technology. I want you to pay attention to the subtitles here, which I will highlight. But they're doing this to women and children as they walk past, right?
اخص عليك. شوف لوين وديت هالشعب. شوف يا سنوار. شوف يا ابو العبد. يا ابو الوليد خالد المشعل. وديت البدله تبعك لدراي كلين اليوم. يا ابو الوليد وديت البدله على دراي كلين. وديتها.
Yeah, they're talking to these people directly. Like, did you take your suit to the dry cleaners? You know, and they're harassing these people who are already literally on a trail of tears. Like, you know.
عشان يكون منظرك حلو. افتح بعد الغداء في الاوتيل. لما تطلع الغرفة عندك في الاوتيل افتح تلفزيون شوف شعبك شوي. بالله عليك يا ابو الوليد. بالله عليك يا ابو العبد. ايوه كملوا نسوان واطفال فقط.
So I just wanted to kind of make that a little more personal for people. You know, they're giving names and family members and intimate details of these lives these people are living.
Right.
You know, so imagine that here. You walk by, you know, your local constable. Like, could you imagine? You know?
I mean, I could no, but you say that I could see that as far as like cops.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
For
especially
sure.
if they interrogate you, they could be like, they don't even say, they don't even need to say. So, what were you doing at around this time?
Yeah.
They can just straight up tell you, you were here,
Yeah.
you were doing this thing, and being like, oh shit, you know.
Yeah.
So
Pre-crime stuff, you know.
right.
So, while Weiss could not independently verify the nature of the cameras being described by witnesses, the use of facial scanning and facial recognition technology by the IOF has been well documented. Facial recognition technology used by Israel pulls from a database of information about Palestinians that has been built up over years, including on Palestinians in the West Bank. One of these databases is called, here's the kicker, Wolfpack. Some of y'all remember that. Some of y'all in the chat whispered of a dream at one point.
Right. Those of you who've been in the space long enough will know what that is.
Literally called Wolfpack. I wish it wasn't. Which, according to Amnesty International, contains extensive information on Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, including where they live, who their family members are, and whether they wanted for questioning by Israeli authorities. Right? So I'm sure this ties into Where's Daddy and all that stuff, right? So, you know, in the old city of Hebron in the southern West Bank, Israeli surveillance cameras use facial recognition systems called Red Wolf on Palestinians who pass through checkpoints in the city. Their faces scanned without their knowledge or consent and compared with biometric entries in databases which exclusively contain information about Palestinians, Amnesty described in May 2023. It is unclear whether the facial recognition technology used throughout the ongoing assault on northern Gaza is the Red Wolf system or the other systems that the Israeli army have been reported to have used throughout the war on Gaza. In March, the New York Times reported that the Israeli Cyber Intelligence Division Unit 8200 used facial recognition technology developed by CoreSight, an Israeli company, in combination with Google Photos. Together, those technologies enabled Israel to pick faces out of crowds and grainy drone footage, right? So, you know, I'm sure. Also, look at, you know, some alumni of 8200 and see where they're at these days. But likewise, it is unclear whether these facial recognition systems are drawing upon data from Wolfpack or another Israeli database, but media attention has recently focused on how that data is being processed and generated through a number of controversial AI programs to identify potential targets. Programs like Lavender, The Gospel, and Where's Daddy have pushed human rights watches to warn against the use of faulty data and exact approximations to inform military actions. We've talked about specifically how they allow mistakes, right, to the tune of percentages. That's innocent people being data-driven decisions. So, not great. Several media exposés have also shown how some of these AI systems loosely identify civilians as targets for assassination or alert the Israeli army to target members of Hamas when they are with their families. Testimonies gathered by Mondo Weiss for this report and in previous reporting confirmed that the brutal Israeli invasion in northern Gaza is utilizing these technologies as means of organizing how it conducts mass arrests, field executions, and ethnic cleansing. So, yeah. Hiba al-Fram is one of the displaced people who passed through the army's checkpoints during the Jabalia invasion. She says she was subjected to a facial and retinal scan, an experience she described as terrifying. Everyone was standing in the line, men and women, and everyone held up their IDs in their hands. Soldiers were using lasers to check our ID card from a distance before we reached them, she told Mondo Weiss. Mondoweiss could not confirm what lasers the military was using. Alfram said the army picked people out of the queue using a laser pointer affixed to a tank. She described the army shining the laser on the ID cards and calling on people to advance towards the checkpoint where the soldiers set up a camera. So, wanted to just kind of show what IOF is willing to use here. So, I don't know if these systems are integrated with this, but I imagine they are. I know Elbit Systems made stuff similar, right? These are like smart optic devices and smart weapon systems in general. So, I figured I'd bring this to just kind of showcase some of that. So let's roll this beam footage real quick.
A military vehicle approaching. On the roof, the new autonomous smash hopper firing system. The car is armored and equipped by Plaza Reham. The objective? To aim and shoot without being seen.
We took the capabilities of the SMASH, this advanced vision system that allows precision shots from the first bullet against static or moving targets, including drones, and we have it placed in the remote-controlled firing system.
A system can be placed on traditional military vehicles, autonomous cars, armored personal carriers, even robots, with one specific objective in mind: to remove soldiers from friction points whilst achieving the same operational result, even with moving targets. In fact, this is how it works. In the era of all technology, it looks rather easy to use.
I block the target with a single click. I lift the safety catch, and I shoot. I have hit my target. I'm looking for another target, shooting. A third target, shooting. It's that simple, but above all, precise.
This is exactly the kind of autonomous weapon system that can be used by any soldiers in the southern border and facing the Gaza Strip, and in the north facing Lebanon and Syria. This system's...
But yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's going to work well. Thoughts so far, Care Bear?
No, again, I just feel like I'm not surprised we're not seeing this technology already. But again, I just think police, and again, given cop cities that are being implemented, around the country, and like all this money is going towards the new toys. I mean, we've seen the robot dogs, that are starting to kind of pop up in cities like New York. Like, I'm sure this is kind of, I don't think it will be as extreme like this, but like things like this that they're able to kind of implement, and and given the empire, like I could well imagine Trump would even want to kind of rack up police funding to even have some of this technology, but it's going to benefit the elite because then
who trains our cops again,
right? They're not scared of us, and then like, especially if you're like protesting and all that kind of stuff, this is stuff that they can use against you. Like they can just scan your face, which even with that, the idea of like, and again, like going back to 2020, we were all wearing masks then, but it was the idea mostly, especially if you're a protest, they will kind of keep you safe, that people won't be able to kind of necessarily identify who you are. Now,
why do you think they make it such a big deal when calling out protesters that they're masked now, right? Especially Israel. You don't think that they're using that technology here to gather data and information? It literally said it could do it from Google Photos. It can't do it from videos from cell phones or, drone shots while somewhere else. Like, so
I think this is just, I just feel like for people, they should be, they're using it in Palestine right now, but this is technology I could see easily being used here to intimidate and to scare people. I mean, going off of the second story that I talked about tonight in terms of, Trump and his basically his fetishization of Israel, basically,
Yep.
is, you know, wanting to protect that, those relationships that he has. So using some of this technology here to dissuade people from protesting here. So
Yeah. So back to this woman's testimony. The soldiers arrested over 100 men in front of her eyes. They had arrested them in front of their wives, and they were beating them, cursing them, threatening to kill them and their families. Many wives saw their husbands in this situation. The soldiers were then telling the women, "We will kill you by a sniper bullet. We will run over your skulls with tanks. We will stone you to death. We will make you bleed to death." Al-Frame continued. The women were terrified and thought they'd be killed. Then the soldiers would gather 5 women at a time and walk them to a security check or a scan of their face or eye. They had arrested 2 women in front of me from the crowd based on their face scans. People later said they were relatives of people known to be members of armed factions, but they were women. They were carrying children. The soldiers ordered them to give their children to other women. The mothers started to panic like crazy. They looked around frantically for any woman they knew to give their children to. We would walk towards the face scanning point in utter terror in our hearts, walking between dozens of tanks and soldiers pointing their weapons at us. We would stand there for 3 or 5 minutes. They were the worst minutes of my life. A person's fate was decided based on that scan. Either arrest, beating, and humiliation, or release them and force them to leave towards the south. After the soldiers take the face scan, the questions about neighbors and relatives began. They asked us where they are, where we could find them, when we last saw them. We did not know anything about these details, so we did not lie when we said we did not know. They would threaten us if we lied. They would uncover the lie and shoot us immediately. Of all the terrifying moments experienced by residents of northern Gaza, many say that they experienced the most terrifying moments when they were stopped at an Israeli checkpoint. The most terrifying and frightening moments were the moments when you stand in front of the camera to get your face scanned, Abu Karim al-Zawadi, a journalist in northern Gaza, told Mondoweiss. Before al-Zawadi reached the facial recognition point on his way toward Gaza City, he saw many young men being arrested by the army. As a Palestinian journalist working in the Gaza Strip, he, like many of his colleagues, is at particular risk of being targeted. 2 minutes, the minutes we stand in front of the camera feel like years, al-Zawadi said. As a journalist conveying our message to the world, I was terrified. Al-Zawadi said that during their march south, many Jabalia residents would attempt to avoid upcoming checkpoints, often to no avail. We had heard the stories about the checkpoints and how they were arresting people, so we tried in whatever way possible to avoid passing through them, but there was no way of escaping. Keep in mind, these are like these supposed safe paths, right? These,
Right.
peaceful corridors, right? So what other options do you have, Collin, if not through the peaceful corridor? Like, where else are you going to go?
Right.
Where
Right.
they're bombing and shooting and killing people. That's the other option. You can take that risk if you don't want to go through these checkpoints.
Mhm.
Pretty much. So, okay. Doesn't sound like very peaceful fucking corridor, does it?
Nope.
When we were examined and the scan shows that one of us will be arrested, the soldiers start beating and cursing them before they take them away, and they disappear. We saw the scene play out in front of us for dozens of young men. Al-Zawadi did not see himself what information was revealed to the soldiers by the scans, but he said the soldiers would repeat aloud what details they were seeing on their screens, including people's personal information, names, relatives, and more. While people were waiting for the scan, Al-Zawadi said that the soldiers would curse at and beat the young men. The army severely beat Al-Zawadi while he was standing and waiting for his turn. They were dirty in their treatment of us, he said, but what can we say in response to a military armed with all these weapons and ready to kill? They used every humiliating method against ordinary people, he added. So, thoughts so far, Care Bear?
I mean, I think I've said what I needed to say, like And given Trump is now president, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of this technology wouldn't be wrapped up here.
Yep.
Especially again, if he's looking to deport or criminalize protesters who are pro-Palestine. I could see this, but I think just more importantly, this can just be a part of the techno state that we're kind of. I know Himbo talks about that a lot,
Yeah.
on his show.
Whitney Webb, all those people.
Right.
Yep.
So it's just our world is becoming more digital, and talking about making your IDs digital, just as far as your phone, but they don't even need to do that. They just can scan your face, and we said, the technology is already there. It's just a matter of mass marketing it to make it, more accessible to, corporations and to organizations that would benefit from using technology. So it's scary to think about, but I think just using that as a fear tactic, in Palestine to make people be like, oh shit, they know everything about me, and as a way to scare them, which is kind of fucked up.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're throwing whatever data they can into it too. So,
right.
But you also saw Google Photos are being used. How complicit is Google in all that? I know they've gotten loads of backlash for helping Israel AI stuff in that regard. So keep an eye out for that stuff. And I'm sure talking about that kind of thing is why we're demonetized on YouTube. So you can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork or scan that QR code on your screen to help keep us afloat outside of that system. We appreciate any help you can give that way. But if you can't, we get it. Capitalism sucks. Like and subscribe. Hit the share button. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Do all the normal engagement things you would normally do. It allegedly helps us. So, whatever works. But, help us get to 3K. Otherwise, thanks for watching. All right. To the chat, Scare Bear. So, Golden Monarch, Robo Zionist Dogs. Yep. So
that's what I'm seeing on YouTube.
But yeah, it's also late for everyone stayed up late last night,
True.
So but Imperialism literally was like, I gotta go bed. Good night. Over on Rumble. So good night. Make sweet dreams. Don't let bed bugs and all that. But Max RJ Thought Control, Google brought to you by YouTube. Yep. That alphabet soup. Yeah, anyway. All right, you ready for the next one?
Yep. So this story is brought to me by Indy, actually. And I think it's very fitting in terms of we just voted over the last month and change, and more so yesterday, given that it was election day. So we often hear stories regarding. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of those stories about broken voter machines, shout out Convo Couch. Fiorella, Pasta, Johnny Mayorka, they did extensive work on this the last couple of elections. So good on them. Go check out their stuff,
Right.
But anyway.
But this article that Indy showed me was very interesting, given that this was written in August. And case in point, so I kind of saw this online yesterday, where not this, no, actually it is this clip that I kind of saw floating around. So I don't think this is the person who originally posted, but at Infantry Bucky, tweeted out, Kentucky voting machines not letting Trump be selected, but then auto-selects Kamala. My father-in-law is over voting machines in Kentucky. I'm going to try and find out if there are a lot of issues happening. God, please let this #election be fair. So if you play this short, so you see the guy trying to push Donald Trump, but then it selects Kamala.
Yep.
So that I saw.
That's also like
floated
bad
around.
touch screens always have a problem with like
Bad touch screens, right?
Yeah. Like
Right.
like they don't calibrate them properly, you know?
Right. This is another story at UltraFrog17. Also posted this. Funny enough, this was in Pennsylvania, given Pennsylvania is a swing state. So I believe this is from a news clip from within the county. So if you want to play this video, it's very short.
Outside of the Pittsburgh region, a software malfunction in the Johnstown area is now preventing some voters from scanning their ballots electronically in precincts. So they're now filling out paper ballots in parts of Cambria County. A court has just granted the Board of Elections their request to extend the time to vote until 10 p.m. within Cambria County. Election officials say despite this issue, citizens should still come out to vote. The Office of Cambria County Commissioner sent Pittsburgh's Action News for a statement that reads in part, quote, there is a process in place for issues of this nature. All completed ballots will be accepted, secured, and counted by the Board of Elections. They also thank the community for their patience and pledge that all votes will be counted. And as so many...
No.
So yeah. So, but this is common. Like we hear all the time whenever we are in voting season that there are issues with machines, and then the idea of like having paper ballots and all that just to make sure that there's voting integrity, is in place and all of that. So as I said, Indy brought me this article from Politico. We normally don't do mainstream media here, but it is interesting. And I forgot who wrote this article, so I apologize. But any articles that most of the time that we list will be in the description below if you want to read it for yourself. But title is The Nation's Best Hackers Found Vulnerabilities in Voting Machines, but no time to fix them. Now, keep in mind, this article was written back in August of this year.
Yeah.
A hack that would disrupt the election is unlikely, but experts are worried that any vulnerabilities could provide fodder for those wishing to question the results. Case in point, what Trump was trying to do at the last election. Come on. There we go. While there have been no foreign cyber attacks taking wide swaths of voting machines offline on election day, or evidence of hacks that affect results, the risk is always there. If you don't think this kind of place is running 24/7 in China, Russia, you're kidding yourselves, Hertz said, gesturing around the room of voting equipment. We are here for only 2.5 days and we find stuff. It would be stupid to assume that the adversaries don't have absolute access to everything. Any issues found in these machines, most of which are used jurisdiction around the US, would need to go through a complex process to be fixed, and that takes much longer than the 2 months until the November general election. Voting village organizers are frustrated that, despite years of security findings, voting machine vendors aren't moving more quickly to make fixes. There's so much basic stuff that should be happening, and it's not happening. So yes, I'm worried about things not being fixed, but they haven't been fixed for a long time, and I'm also angry about it, Hersey said during a break in the day. While there is a robust system in place for certifying voting systems, it is a long one. Even if you find a vulnerability next week in a piece of modern equipment that's deployed in the field, there's a challenge in getting the patch and getting the fix out to the state and local election officials and onto the equipment before the November election, said Algerie, Executive Director of the Information Technology Information Sharing and Analysis Center. The group serves as a way to companies in the IT space to share threat information. Algier, who also runs the organization Elections Industry Special Interest Group, said the process involves getting a sign-off from the machine manufacturer, then getting the system recertified by relevant authorities, then going in and updating each device. This complex series of steps is complicated even more by most election machines being behind lockdown weeks in advance of the elections. It is not a 90-day fix. It is not a Microsoft every Tuesday issue your patch and everything works fine, Algier said. It's a pretty complicated process. There are some proposals to speed up the process so election officials aren't scrambling to update voting machines every time DFCON happens in an election year. For example, some argue that depending too much on one annual event at a private conference is not the best approach. One option to speed up the process: bring voting machine vendors together with hackers in a more formalized setting. The elections industry, SIG, hosted an event last year in Washington that did just that and helped to build bridges between a typically suspicious industry and security researchers.
Yes.
We want to build a program where we can work in partnership with the security researchers under the principles of coordinated vulnerable disclosure, Algier said. Until then, those who packed up the voting village this weekend with lines spilling out in the hallway, the event serves a higher purpose. We may not be able to fix everything about our election system in the next 90 days, but we can start by getting some of our facts straight and by understanding how election systems work, Terranova said. So, short article, but any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, they've been doing like competitions on these voting machines for quite a while now, as far as being able to hack into them, and it usually takes like young people very short amount of time to compromise them, you know?
Right.
I've never felt like what's the difference? It's like voter fraud, right? Versus election fraud. I feel like election fraud's much more common, you know, and affects things a lot more. But you know, that to me is more the important thing with these machines. Look into who owns these machines. Who, I mean, I know classically, I think it was, you know, Anonymous sat through one of the tunnels that was being used for one of those and like noticed a ton of, you know, suspicious activity through there.
Right.
With packets being exchanged and stuff.
I remember back in the 2020 primary in the Iowa caucus, like Buttigieg got caught with, like, I forgot the exact details, but like he was connected to some tampering with the voting machines, you know, so which looked like he was the winner when he wasn't. Like, it was actually, I would argue, probably Bernie at. So
yeah,
you know, so the idea, like, but as we said, this has been an issue that is notoriously common, but yet there are no real fixes towards making voting machines a lot more viable and secure so that they don't have these problems. But again, it makes sense given that they're not used that frequently. So they're just kind of sitting in storage, collecting dust or whatever, I'm sure. But
yeah,
it's the idea of, like, if you want to give the illusion that we have a democracy, especially if you're trying to have, ideally, every person in the country vote, you need to make sure that the technology is there for them to, you know, to make that viable. Because if it breaks down or, you know, or it's being tampered with, then you are going to have people who question the integrity of elections. And that's not to say, even with this election, that it still might not happen, but I don't think it's likely given that Trump, you know, right now is president-elect. But who's to say, you know, especially given in the last segment, and actually now that I'm thinking about it, like, that could be also another thing that we need to be enact technology. Even if you just may not even have to use a ballot or even a computer, they can just maybe use your face, use biometrics to determine how to vote. So like, even with that, just seems very sketch to me, or I just feel like it could be a way to kind of introduce a lot of these technologies in our voting system as well.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. But yeah, shout out Convo Couch. Go check out their stuff on voting machines. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, again, we're gonna keep it short because I think you have 2 extra stories, and then we might have 1 more tonight. So, but such stories like this are while we are demonetized. So, if you want to support us, please, you can use your QR code on this and scan the code on the screen in order to give money to Ko-fi, or you can go to the link that you see at the bottom of the screen, type it in, and you can go there to donate. You can donate as little as $1 or how much you can in order to support us here on the channel as well as INN. And please, please, please feel free to give us a like and help us share our content in order to reach more people. YouTube hates us, so why didn't that pop up?
There it goes.
There it goes. Make sure you leave a comment so we do read them, and often than not, we would love to have more people kind of share, their ideas and thoughts so that we're able to possibly pull stories that you recommend that we can look into, help us get to 3K so we're able to grow and reach more people in terms of sharing our content. And thanks for watching.
Yeah. All right. We check on chats a bit. I know Vicky Adams they've been doing tons of stuff for their gardens. Dude, I have so much citrus in my garden right now. Like, my citrus trees have finally got like old enough to start putting on real fruit. And dude, I've got like too many oranges, too many like lemons. I don't know what to do with it. What do I do with them? You know what I mean? Like, let me know. I mean, I get like I could do jelly, but like, who wants to do that much jelly? There's got to be other ways to like preserve that kind of stuff,
Right.
But I'm gonna have to start making a lot of cocktails, I guess. So, one of the two. Start using that stuff up. You know what I mean? Get some little drinks on the go. But yeah, Manta's talking about marmalade. Sure. Like I got like big giant Meyer lemons where it's like literally like the branch the lemons are on, or like it's like almost on the ground right now. It's like what? Like heavy with that nonsense. So, but anyway, you ready for the next one? Please.
Yes, we are. I am.
Well, I brought this article. I saw it from Vanessa Beeley shared it. Shared a little expert from it and posted a link and started reading. Thought, oh, this will be good. We've talked about this before. And was heavily surprised by the article. So I figured we'd give it a shot. And it's from a place I don't think we've done stuff from before. So even better. So this is from the Institute for Palestinian Studies, right? Author Aziz Yafi, which we'll get to that name in a bit. It might sound familiar to some people. But they write Digging with Tunnels, Anonymous Publishing as Intellectual Resistance. So I titled this Clandestine Publishing, which is another way to say that. But we'll get into that. I also like my picture. I feel like digging tunnels with pins was a really good imagery for me. So, but anyway, they write Academic Institute responded to pro-Palestinian voices on their campuses by immediately censoring, intimidating, and defaming anyone who challenged institutional power. However, largely thanks to the global student intifada, these institutions' walls are beginning to crumble. Still, work remains to dismantle the structures of supremacy, coloniality. There it is. I got it. English. And racism within these spaces. So, you as a teacher, I felt like this was useful to you, and as an academic in general. So we'll continue a bit, but in almost all universities across the Western genocidal world where I write from, this censorship is starkly visible. Students, faculty, and staff alike are targeted, and the university remains passive, unwilling to safeguard the freedom of speech it claims to champion. This suppression mirrors a broader trend in Western academia, where coloniality, decolonization is only accepted as a subject of study, used as a buzzword that interprets but does not interrupt institutions. Decolonization is vehemently resisted when it seeks to challenge or disrupt the material structures of power. The university cannot allow for decolonial theory to become a tangible anti-colonial praxis, threatening the foundations of which these institutions are built. What does that sound like, Collin?
Capitalism.
What?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. But as scholars, we are forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that Western institutions cannot truly be decolonized. What do we do then with the very structures we seek to change, enforce the limits on our activism, writing, and thoughts? I propose an alternative solution. Clandestine publishing is a form of intellectual resistance and is a pathway to knowledge production that bypasses the gatekeepers of Western academia and operates beyond its restrictive boundaries. Clandestine publishing allows us to topple institutional walls, reveal the weakness of the powerful, and center the hope and vitality of the struggle. Now, you asked me what that was when I put this story in yesterday. Well, I figured I'm very much, our brains are alike. Like, people should probably know the definition of that, right? So from Wikipedia, clandestine literature, also called underground literature, refers to a type of editorial and publishing process that involves self-publishing works, often in contradiction with the legal standards of a location. Clandestine literature is often an attempt to circumvent censorship, prosecution, or other suppression. So that's what this person is talking about, right? Self-publishing, physical items, right? Things in real space. Yes.
Underground.
Right. Well, because you're not going to get published in any of the main publications. So it's going to have to be.
Well, I mean, if it's in Palestine, it's gone.
Yes.
So,
and
then obviously, as we reported, their school infrastructure, university infrastructure is also gone.
You are a study of world history, and especially of religious world history. What is clandestine publishing to you? What does that harken back to? You know, like,
well, it kind of brings me the first thought, like, if you're looking at it in terms of the Bible, especially in the Roman era, where Christianity was, was kind of outlawed. It was, now given that at that time, a lot of the stuff was taught orally.
Yes.
There was a lot of oral tradition there.
And that kept going through.
But often if you wanted to learn more, or if you wanted to learn more about the Bible, or if you in terms of the teachings of Jesus, like, you had to go probably to a secret location.
Yeah.
Within the empire, as hosting would kind of share. So basically what we like today, what we kind of consider Bible study, that's what they will actually do, but they will actually have to do it in secret. And then just kind of going along with that,
Fast
just a
forward
second,
to
even in the modern era, like especially for churches that are evangelizing in other countries where Christianity may not be
Yep.
as prominent. Thinking of China, at least back in the day, that was
Sure.
also something that
with their
that would,
the fish mirrors. I remember that.
exactly. Right.
But fast forward a bit to, you know, Martin Luther, not the junior one, but the actual one with his Gutenberg
Right.
press, right?
Mhm.
You know, printing the Bible in German at the time, right?
Yes.
So that's a big factor. You know, we're talking about little red books being published. We're talking about and someone in the chat will remind me of the Revolutionary War one, right? That little red book that got printed around. You know, you talk about all those guys, Franklin and all them ran publishing stuff, right? They had their own printing press. So that kind of thing is, I think, important. And it's something we don't talk about here in the space. We've talked about it with people like the Uhuru movement who have their own newsletter, right? You know, actual print literature and stuff to hand out. But
right.
This article continues. So since 2021, censorship of pro-Palestine speech in the UK has surged by 450%, according to reports from various legal and civil rights groups. These repression extends beyond universities, infiltrating workplaces, schools, and public spaces. Employees have been suspended or dismissed for as little as wearing a keffiyeh, while students have been subjected to surveillance under programs such as Prevent, which falsely equates pro-Palestinian speech with signs of radicalization. The campaign of silencing is deeply entrenched in university culture. Zionist organizations like the Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting and Analysis, aka CAMRA, employ students to spy on pro-Palestinian voices on campuses, incentivizing them to falsely accuse their peers of anti-Semitism. This is all while powerful lobbying groups such as UK Lawyers for Israel pressure institutions to terminate the contracts of academics who challenge dominant pro-Israeli narratives. Such attacks are not grounded in legitimate legal claims, but are rather part of a broader strategy to financially destabilize those who speak up for Palestine and intimidate future pro-Palestinian voices into silence. This culture of fear leads many scholars to self-censor and reduce their political engagement to private conversations. Sound familiar, Care Bear?
Yep.
So these acts of repression are not new. Historically, those who challenge dominant power structures, whether during the Cold War under Thatcher's regime or in the wake of more recent movements such as BLM, have always faced retaliation. However, the repression of pro-Palestinian voices today reveals a profound hypocrisy. While the West claims to champion freedom of speech, it enforces silence on any issues that threaten its imperial and colonial ambitions. This hypocrisy has been amplified by Western institutions' swift and outspoken condemnations of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. In this context, the role of clandestine publishing becomes critical. Throughout history, from the underground pests in colonial India to the anti-psychiatry publications in Europe and the US, that was the ones calling out asylums at the time, right? In case you were wondering, you know, the shock therapy and fucking terrible torture that was happening in those institutions. Those oppressed by censorship have turned to anonymous, hidden forms of knowledge production to spread anti-imperialist and anti-capitalist revolutionary thought. These efforts provided invaluable while circulating radical ideas and resisting dominant power structures. I want to remind people, you see all these purple words here, right? In these articles, these are actually linked, right? So that particular efforts is in relation to this website called revolutionarypapers.org. Again, if you go to the website in the description below, you can get to it. But it's Revolutionary Papers is a transnational research collaboration exploring 20th century periodicals of left, anti-imperial, and anti-colonial critical production. So this is an entire like website dedicated to clandestine publishing in regards to like Kenyan resistance, right? Like, you know, I mean, pick an anti-colonial topic, right? So I feel like it was a really good resource to kind of showcase. You know, they got teaching tools and all that fun stuff, but go check that out on your own time. But they continue, Palestinians too have a rich tradition of clandestine publishing, particularly during the revolutionary movements of the 1970s, often produced anonymously or pseudonymously. Publications such as Arab Palestinian Resistance, Free Palestine Newspaper, and other pamphlets and periodicals allowed for the dissemination of revolutionary ideas that challenged colonial narratives and affirmed Palestinian self-determination. One of these is literally like a PDF linked in the article that you can actually go read the entire publication from the 1970s, which we might do at a later date. But other pamphlets and periodicals allowed for the dissemination of revolutionary ideas that challenged colonial narratives and affirmed Palestinian self-determination. Similarly, and this I found an interesting connection to this, you know, paper is not the only thing you can publish on, Collin, right? So, Palestinians in refugee camps have always used the walls of their camps to powerfully write the truth for all to see. Without fear of repercussion, today the practice is more relevant than ever in an era where speaking publicly about Palestinian liberation invites severe repercussion. Clandestine knowledge production offers a powerful alternative. So, this is from the article linked right here about using the walls, right? So, reflecting on his childhood in Wamia camp in the 1970s, Salem Yassin writes of the importance of reading and listening to the camp's walls, what he calls the people's free newspaper. The messages they convey, Yassin suggests, as part of a dialogue with world events and history, as much as they are about internal dialogues within the camp. They are written by the organic intellectuals, ordinary Palestinians who reside in the camps. They convey critical reflections of the world, foster engagement with the world beyond the camp, and call for liberatory or solidarity actions. These days, their writings transcend the physical walls and find their way into the digital realm, prominently featured on Facebook walls and other social media platforms. Since October 7th, the walls of most Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon have been adorned with murals, posters, and pictures commemorating the attacks, as well as images of martyrs in Abu Abida, the spokesperson for Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades. This visual tapestry reinforces the enduring commitment to armed resistance within the community and attempts to minimize the burning distance between Palestine and the camps in Lebanon. On the surface, Hezbollah and its Palestinian allies in the camp, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, restrict and oversee how and when people can engage in armed struggle against Israel. The post-1991 equilibrium between the Palestinian liberation struggle and Lebanese sovereignty, having found a solution in Hezbollah's control over the resistance. But this arrangement leaves many unhappy Palestinian groups who feel they are subordinates to the Islamic resistance, as well as opponents of Hezbollah who argue that the party has taken over the Lebanese state prerogative and acts as proxy of Iran. So here are some of the, things that they are talking about, right? As your standard graffiti. And Collin, listen, I would never tell anyone who wanted to put their message out to do anything illegal. Want to make that clear. I would never suggest doing anything like that, especially if it gets your message across incredibly well. I would not tell anyone to do that. But I think things like this, right? Leaving stuff at your local restaurants, right? Little cards, things like that, QR codes to scan to send them to places. I think that's a pretty effective way myself You know, how many times
Yeah.
have you stopped at one of those boards in a restaurant to look at business cards and things like that? You know what I mean? I don't know if that's just
Right.
a small town thing or if it's a, your school's got community boards and things like that. And it's not like you got to leave your name and number on it, you know? Just put some tape up, put some posters up, do something. But, anyway, so the university system has historically commodified and extracted knowledge from marginalized communities, but it always stops short of allowing that knowledge to inform real resistance. Universities have circumvented militant knowledge, preached neutrality, demanded knowledge be depoliticized, and confined decolonization to distant history. These institutions demand theory without practice and draw a border between the university and the public. Education and politics, academics and activists, our knowledge production is only useful if it can be a commodified product that brings in more students and money and enhances the university's reputation, but the money we would bring in would then be invested in our own genocide.
Capitalism.
So, any thoughts so far, Care Bear?
I mean, as you said, if you want to kind of get, well, as I tell my students, the idea of writing is to communicate ideas.
Yeah.
And then, but you have to find a medium in order for you to do that. Now, obviously, the mediums that they would have typically or traditionally are gone or very limited. So you have to figure out another way to be able to do it, but a way to kind of do it safely so that, you're able to get the information that you need to get out there but without, having people track you or whatever, especially if the content is a little more, as I would say, a little more spicy, we'll say.
Yeah.
So, but I can also see this in terms of, there's a lot here that I can kind of pull from, and it doesn't have to be necessarily like written text. It can be through art, as, just tradition. Well, back in the day, especially for people that can read, you often use art as a way to kind of tell a story or kind of communicate information. So, especially for the working class that typically would not be able to do that, I can also kind of see that and you probably did see it in the pictures there, that you can see some semblance of that there.
Yeah.
But then obviously trying to use, again, walls, like we call it graffiti, but street art or whatever you want to call it here. So there's a lot in terms of art and literacy kind of being intertwined in order to communicate the messages that people want to share. It's very apparent here.
So I follow this person on Twitter, and I suggest people do so by the name of Chloe. Right here, I'll pull it up. Scroll down to this kind of stuff all the time. So, let's close those. But they post Palestinian art all the time, right? So this is at, what is that, at KLOWEY, right?
I can't see.
Oh, you can't see?
Well, I can see, but it's hard to read.
Hard to read. Do this and this. There we go. And that. Cool. But like, yeah, I mean, they just post stuff like this all the time, which, as you were talking about, with, art in general being another form of this publication. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just like a literary magazine, but not in a magazine.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So,
like in terms of paper and binding it together.
Yep.
So just, yeah.
And I think the art just speaks somehow easier. Like, it just has a lot more emotions and stuff tied to it. But just to continue with this article a bit, as Edward Said reminds us, the role of the intellectual is to speak truth to power, and yet today's academic structure constrain our ability to do so. The pressure to publish in prestigious journals, secure conditional grants, and adhere to the Western model of named authorship limits our capacity to produce militant, collective knowledge that can truly challenge systems of oppression. It strangulates any time spent sharing our knowledge with our communities and seeking to end our own financial and immigration precarity amid the cesspit of late-stage capitalism and militarized borders. We sacrifice the radicalism of our thoughts while also entrenching financially and socially the very systems and ideas we seek to dismantle. And that's by design. But embracing clandestine publishing, we reject the commodification of knowledge and the constraints of Western individualism. We center the collective over the individual, the struggle over the author. This strategy, borrowed from revolutionary movements across history, allow us to bypass the structure that seek to censor and punish us, creating spaces for radical ideas to thrive and circulate beyond the confines of institutional power. Resisting the commodification of knowledge also requires resisting novelty. Clandestine writing does not necessarily have to be new. It can also involve the revisiting of revolutionary ideas from the past and archival sources that have been suppressed by the passage of time and institutional power hierarchies, returning revolutionary knowledge to our collective struggle. Ultimately, we must recognize that our energies are better spent outside the academy and in strategically extracting its resources to fuel our anti-colonial work elsewhere. It is time to return to the archives of insurgent knowledge, revive the revolutionary spirit of past movements, and produce knowledge that resists self-censorship and affirms the struggle for Palestinian liberation by all means necessary. In times of intensified repression, clandestine publishing becomes a necessity and a vital form of intellectual and political survival. As censorship tightens, we must draw from history, learn from past movements, and rely on one another to keep the flame of resistance burning. This is not a call to abandon the academic space entirely, but to master the art of navigating both worlds, maintaining our presence within institutional frameworks, while never losing sight of the collective struggle. To go underground as academics means to learn from the endurance of Palestinian resistance, the steadfastness of Gaza, and the struggle of Palestinian prisoners. It is to call to learn rather than teach, to apply knowledge rather than extract it. The tunnels dug by Palestinian prisoners with spoons and those created by Gaza's resistance symbolize a reorientation of our approach, teaching us to think not just laterally, but vertically. Subverting spatial barriers and borders, these tunnels remind us to delve into our collective history of knowledge, production to republish what has been buried or scattered in lost archives, and to make accessible what's been withheld by institutional gatekeepers. Doing so teaches us to reject the Western capitalist drive for constant novelty, which seeks to erase the wisdom of militant generations before us. The words of those who were often assassinated for their ideas remain alive. To learn from Palestinian resistance is to carve and dig escape tunnels from academia's mental production lines with pens as our tools. We go underground not to bury our heads and remain hidden, but to traverse and dismantle the borders that confine us. We go underground to emerge stronger, to speak loudly and radically in spaces where our voices are suppressed, and to break through the boundaries that seek to silence us. So, I told you we'd get to the name of the author, right? So, Aziz Yafi is a pseudonym. The writer chose as an ode to the same pen name used by Dr. Abu Wahab al-Khalili, founder and editor of a Free Palestine newspaper published in London between 1968 and 1984. He was assassinated by Israel in 1981, but his pen name continued to be used as an editorial byline until 1991, according to archival material found by the writer of this article. So, I find that an interesting tactic, and, probably a lovely honoring. So, Anyway, your thoughts, Care Bear, before we head out of here?
Yeah, just last thought. So over the weekend, I went to a book signing slash lecture with former foreign correspondent to the Washington Post, John. I talked to you about this one. So he has a new book out. No, I don't have the book on me right now. It's back there. But he wrote a book based on class in America, especially among Black people. But what he talked about, which I thought was interesting, kind of related to this, is how, the Palestinians got a lot, not to say they got inspired, but in many ways they got inspiration in terms of resistance, from the Black Power movement that was happening in this country. Well, you can argue in the West during the 60s. And we talked about, Kwame Ture at the beginning of the show. He was a huge component of the Black Power movement. So it kind of makes sense. And given what we know of the Black Panthers, a lot of this stuff was underground. A lot of the stuff, was kind of done in secret, not to make themselves like kind of in your face. But it was still this idea of sharing information, strategizing, in terms of organization and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of that, I could definitely see kind of being implemented, in this way. But the idea that it's often mentions, an intellectual is a person who speaks truth to power. I think being in education, I feel that idea is definitely lost, because more often than not, you're not trained to speak the truth. You're trained to regurgitate propaganda based on what other people tell you is acceptable, and not to deviate from that. Whereas here, it's the idea of really truly seeking knowledge in terms of really discovering, and my guess is also debating, and I think just being more in tune with the world and what is happening around, and using other people groups means of resistance in order to reflect their own, and in order to kind of communicate those ideas, and as well as strategies to support their own movement. So it seems like it's very communal in a sense, in terms of wanting all this information to be shared among the community, but kind of bringing your own spin to it. And, as I said earlier, it reminds me more of like a literary magazine. You mentioned, we mentioned at the beginning of the show, kind of what the WHO movement has been doing, like not relying on resources that are already created, but creating their own and having the means to do their own thing. Now, obviously, in Palestine, a lot of those infrastructure is limited, if not destroyed completely. So having to find other ways, which I think just even that creativity, kind of like out of
scratch that crap in clay tablets, do something.
Right. So yeah, just seeing a lot of that resistance thinking, but then like using what the resources that they have in order to create and to share and to motivate people to be powerful in terms of how they communicate in terms of fighting for resistance.
I also found the whole take on anonymity was interesting here, right? As like a tool to allow yourself more freedom to like, I think it kind of opened my eyes up to possibilities there, especially like in and around the workplace. If you could leave pamphlets without people knowing who did it and who left, you know what I mean? Like any of those kind of things, you leave that little red book in the break room and see if someone else reads it, Like that kind of stuff I feel like is not a bad idea, really. And I think that's been lost on people, that level of like, you know, using your talents, however small, you know, to like enact like real thought outside of, you know, the influence they would let you have, especially digitally. You know, I think suppression is so rampant, you know, that like doing that kind of thing to push even your digital side of that publishing, also very useful. So it's a thought. So, you know, but yeah, I'm sure talking about ways to get around suppression is probably why we're demonetized. You can go to ko-fi.com/indienewsnetwork to help keep our lights on. You know, scan that QR code on your screen if you're so inclined. But if you can't do that, sharing this video is probably the best way to help. Liking and subscribing, leaving comments, doing all that engagement stuff you're supposed to. You know, we're getting our number up on that old subscription count, so help us get to 3K, you know? But otherwise, thanks for watching. But anyway, before the chats get too in the weeds about talking about liberal meltdowns again, you know, so Max RJ, people get addicted and they can't stop, even if it is an illusion. Yep. Tons of stuff. It's also not necessarily like by their own accords. I think those illusions tend to be, you know, manipulated and planted by the media. So, unfortunately. But anyway, you ready for our last story, Care Bear? You know, possibly second to last, depending. This was going to be short. So, but, well, since Trump's in office, Collin, well, not in office, but, you know, president-elect now, right? This is everyone's fears, right? Women's health being in jeopardy now.
Right.
You know, abortions and all that jazz, which we've talked about before on the show, why you might be paying attention to that. But turns out, Collin, women's rights around the world are probably more threatened. So Sharon Jang over in Sheer Post, over 11,000 pregnant people in Lebanon at risk due to Israel's aggression. So this is in Lebanon now, right? We've seen Palestine. Now we're heading into Lebanon, and we're affecting women's health there. So Sharon writes, thousands of pregnant people are being impacted by Israeli bombardment and invasion of Lebanon, according to the UN Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency, with pregnant people facing fewer and fewer options for care and shelter as Israeli forces attack huge swaths of the country's civilian infrastructure. An estimated 11,000 pregnant people in Lebanon have been affected by Israel's escalation violence and campaign of forced displacement. The UN Population Fund has reported roughly 1,300 of these affected are expected to give birth in the next month, according to the agency. Right?
Yeah.
So, you remember this when we did this, Care Bear? Women's health in Gaza?
Yeah.
Right? So, I suggest people actually go, you know, find that on our channel. I'll try to remember to annotate it. It'll be up there in the top right if I remember to do that. Otherwise, yell at me in the comments that I didn't. But here's, you know, we talked about the Gaza health situation there when, you know, period pads were not being available and pregnancies across the country. When was this? Do you remember?
I want to say March.
Sure. So during this clip, you brought this, right? Which I felt was very fitting to play again after, you know, all we have heard for like the last day is Kamala lost because she's a woman and women's rights are, you know, being, you know, they're going to take them away any day now. So I figured this little bit was fitting to play again for people. So enjoy us twice, I guess. You know.
So Saba, I guess her full name is Saba Saeed. Dick from RBN interviewed her last night. So go ahead. If you did not see that interview, I haven't seen it, but I heard from him that was great. Go and watch that interview that he did with her last night. But she spoke about this regarding abortion, regarding women's rights in Gaza, just kind of what we talked about. She mentioned this on Face the Nation on Sunday. So let's remind ourselves what she said.
You said reproductive rights are a huge factor for you, but that you probably won't vote for President Biden.
I think it would be hypocritical of me to use reproductive rights as a way to justify voting for Biden when Biden is aiding and sending military aid to Israel, which is airstriking Gaza and blocking humanitarian aid, leading to women there who are pregnant, either getting C-sections without anesthesia, not being able to be provided with
prenatal
care.
Prenatal care.
You remember that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, turns out they're doing that in Lebanon too. So, but this was also in that video, right? I wanted to kind of give another recap. So, 1 million displaced Palestinians were women and girls, right? This is of January 23rd again, right? 700,000 don't have access to basic hygiene. All these numbers are going to be way low now, right? So, water pipelines between Israel and Gaza, like on 1 out of 3. 20,000 babies have been born into that war. 2 mothers are killed every hour. I mean, these statistics were crazy even then. So, and again, she talked about C-sections without anesthesia, right? So, back to Lebanon. Over 1.4 million people have been displaced by Israel's assault. Lebanese officials have estimated, including 500,000 children, the displacement is causing physical, financial, and mental stress, with many families being displaced multiple times by Israeli forces. Dangers for pregnant people are exacerbated by the Israeli military's destruction of a quarter of Lebanon's infrastructure, estimates say, including its attacks on 53 health facilities and 27 ambulances amid the current escalation. UNFPA shared the story of Sumaya, who was forced to flee South Lebanon when Israel began its heavy bombardments in September. Sumaya was 5 months pregnant when she, her husband, and their 8 children began heading towards Syria, a journey that took 4 days with little food, only to find the borders closed. When they were finally granted entry, Sumaya experienced a stillbirth and was rushed to the hospital, where doctors treated her. I woke up in the middle of the night with sharp pain and cramps. When I went to the bathroom, I realized that something was wrong. I was in my 5th month of pregnancy, and my baby was gone, she told the UNFPA. Losing my baby in the midst of all this chaos felt like the final blow, Sumaya said. Those still in Lebanon are facing fewer and fewer options for healthcare, including reproductive care. Lebanon's healthcare system has been pushed to the brink by Israeli aggression, with at least 100 primary healthcare centers and at least 5 hospitals being forced to close. Just on Thursday, Lebanon's health ministry reported that Israeli forces killed 6 paramedics and wounded 4 in attacks spanning just a few hours in southern Lebanon. War crimes. With 4 being killed after Israeli struck a gathering point for civil defense. In total, Israeli forces have killed 178 paramedics in Lebanon and wounded 179. In all, Lebanese health officials report that 2,800 people have been killed in Lebanon since October 2023. The death toll includes a staggering number of children. Officials have reported that 166 children have been killed in the past year in Lebanon. The death toll of Israeli massacres is increasing. According to that'll help. According to UNICEF, this month alone, Israel has killed at least one child in Lebanon and injured 10 more each day. So thousands more children who have survived the many months of constant bombings, physically unscathed, are now acutely distressed by the violence and chaos around them, the group's executive director, Catherine Russell, said in a statement on Thursday. So, thoughts, Care Bear?
I mean, we've talked about this before, but again, the idea of abortion, like, that's the issue that Democrats were leading heavily into, which I understand, and it is important, sure. But at the same time,
international women's rights matter too, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly. So you
yeah.
can talk about abortion rights here when around the world there are women who, through war, are not, who basically have to, well, just due to the conditions, are aborting their kids, and they do not have the means to do that safely. And having to go through that trauma of losing a child under horrific conditions in war. And so my thing is, and this is kind of what I shared earlier tonight, it's the idea of how comfortable are you to step over other people, especially if they may be in another country, see them or connect with them, in order to maintain, and I argue they're not rights at all. The idea of rights is that they're not easily taken away. So really it's just a privilege that the government is choosing to give to you just to kind of appease you and kind of keep you like a busy little worker bee. But then it's the idea of like, how can you walk over marginalized communities who don't have those privileges in order to protect your own? So it's the idea of like, liberation should not come at the cost of other people, to of the oppression of others. It's like, if I don't have it, we all kind of suffer through it. And you can argue that's probably what people are going to be feeling under Trump, you know, or I'm going to lose this thing or I'm going to lose that thing. You know, you're going to fight for that here, and you have the means to do that here. Like in other countries, that's not even an option. They'll just straight up kill you. And then, you know, and again, for many, especially in this case, women, you know, they don't have a choice. So in the matter. So it's just very hypocritical that we want to protect women's rights here when our policies are affecting women's rights around the world, and they do not, and regardless of who is going to be president, it's still the same condition.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Well, I didn't want this to just be like two dudes talking about, you know, women's health and women in general. You know, I figured we should probably let some women speak on the matter. You know, which they would do anyway. I don't have to let them. I don't, you know how this works. But this is from Abier, right? So Palestinian women, the unsung heroes, right? I figured it was important to kind of let, you know, them talk about their experiences with that. So, here, I'll let this lady speak for herself.
And set up medical teams. They performed critical surgeries under apartheid regimes and gave birth at checkpoints as soldiers looked in between. Our women learned to teach in abandoned spaces. They built their own schools, wrote their own rules for the sake of their own children's education. Our women learned to cook without any supplies, used wood for cooking gas and traditional clay for oven to bake taboon and keep their own families alive. Our women even created resilient art. They knit flags when they were banned and carried them proudly as they marched hand in hand, singing songs they wrote, inspired by their scars. As their loved ones stood wrongfully behind prison bars, our women are bilingual. صحيح أنهم احتلوا أرضنا ولكن لم يحتلوا وجداننا. Tarab Abdelhadi founded the Palestinian Women's Congress and resisted the British occupation. Ahid Tamimi's defying slap reached multiple generations. Muna al-Kurd's journalism revealed a settler colonial state. So did the lenses of Bisan, Hind, Plastia, and Lama Jammus, our youngest journalist to date. Our women, my mother, grand and great, continue to preserve our culture by all means. It's strength we've all inherited from our ancestors' genes, so our women do so much more than just talk. We could even teach you, but I at least would rather not.
So, closing thoughts?
Protect all women means protect all women everywhere, and not just here.
Well, talking about these things is why we're demonetized. So you can scan that QR code, go to co-fi.com/indienewsnetwork. You know, leave us $1 or $2. You know, hook us up. But can't do that. Like and subscribe. Hit the share button. Leave a comment. Do all the stuff you would do on any other video you liked. You know, let us know what you think. Get in those comments. Help us get to 3K. We're getting there. Anyway, thanks for watching. All right. Well, what's next, Care Bear? I think that's it, huh?
Well, I'm in the mood. You want to do one quick story?
Sure. What do you got?
So, actually, let me pull it up.
I got it.
So,
I think.
yeah, thank you. Next one.
There you go.
There we go. So this is kind of a breaking story. So this I kind of saw yesterday, and it's kind of going not to say viral, but I've seen the rounds on Twitter today. So I pulled this tweet from Zachary Foster, where he tweeted, as predicted, Israel waited till yesterday. Yesterday being election day, November 5th. The date of the U.S. presidential election to officially announce that Palestinians are in the process of being ethnically cleansed from North Gaza, doing Zionism quietly like clockwork. So we've seen this before. Israel uses a major event that's happening in the country, the Super Bowl debate, to commit a war crime, essentially. So so actually, I'm going to read what Zachary put down at the bottom. Over the next 48 hours, Israel will likely slaughter and ethnically cleanse Palestinians at an accelerated rate, especially now weeks after the election. Time for U.S. presidential election day, so as to minimize the PR damage. In other words, not have it be
noticed.
Covered.
Right, yeah.
Which is why we're going to cover it. This is a phenomenon that I call doing Zionism quietly. So we're going to read half of the Guardian article that he posted here. Come on. There we go. So it's written by Bethan Beckerman and William Christou, where they report Palestinians will not be allowed to return homes in northern Gaza, says IOF. Brig General Izzy Cohen said in a briefing that aid would not be allowed to enter south of Gaza Strip, only be allowed to enter in the south, but not the north. So they continue. Israeli ground forces are getting closer to the complete evacuation of northern Gaza, and residents will not be allowed to turn home, the IOF has said. In what appears to be the first official acknowledgement for Israel, it is systematically removing Palestinians from the area. In a briefing on Tuesday night, the IOF Brig Gen Izzy Cohen told Israeli reporters that since troops have been forced to enter some areas twice, such as the Jahala camp, there is no intention of allowing the residents of the northern Gaza Strip to return to their homes. He added that humanitarian aid will not be allowed to regularly enter the south of the territory, but would be allowed, to regularly enter the south of the territory, but not the north, since there are no more civilians left. International humanitarian law experts have said that such actions would amount to the war crimes of forcible transfer and the use of food as a weapon. The Israeli army and government have repeatedly denied trying to force the remaining population of northern Gaza to flee to the relatively safety of the south during a month-long renewed offensive and tightening siege. Residents are still clinging on in the north have said that the new operation has created the worst conditions of the war to date. Israel said that the push is necessary to combat regrouped Hamas cells. Right groups and aid agencies have alleged that despite the denials, Israel appears to be carrying out a version of the so-called General's Plan, which proposes giving civilians a deadline to leave and then treating anyone who remains as a combatant. It is unclear how many people remain in northern Gaza. Last month, the UN estimated there are about 400,000 civilians unable or unwilling to follow Israeli evacuation orders. On Wednesday, social media footage showed waves of several dozen displaced people carrying children and rucksacks are walking south through flattened areas of Gaza City. Many had not eaten in days. Huda Abdul Ayla told the Associated Press, "We came barefoot. We have no sandals, no clothes, nothing. We have no money. There's no food or drink," she said. At least 15 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the northern town of Beit Lahia on Wednesday. Al Jazeera reported, but communication difficulties meant there was no official count of the strike from the Gaza Health Ministry. Hussam Abdul Safia, the director of Beit Lahia's struggling Kamal Adan Hospital, posted a video of patients fleeing from the top floors of the building as it was hit by artillery fire. Israel cut the territory in two earlier this year by creating what it calls the Netzarim corridor, separating what was once the densely populated Gaza City from the rest of the Strip. In Tuesday's briefing, Cohen also confirmed that northern Gaza has now been split again to divide Gaza City from the more rural north. Resettling or permanently reoccupying Gaza is not official Israeli policy, but senior Israeli defense officials recently told the Israeli daily Haaretz that with no other alternatives on the table, the government is aiming to annex parts of the territory. So, yeah, it's just getting worse. And as you know, and as I said, this is probably not going to be reported heavily, even within our space, given that everybody is going to talk about, the election and analyzing the election and all that. But we have to remember, regardless if it was Trump or Harris, the genocide is still occurring. And at least now we know. So this is really Israel basically saying, yeah, we're committing genocide without saying it.
Yeah.
But, but basically they're kind of admitting, yeah, we are trying to exterminate these people, from northern Gaza. So very sad. Yeah, Trump is he gonna make it worse? Sure. But but the thing is, Biden and Harris are still in charge for the next 2 months. So really, even now, even during the lame duck session, they can do something. It's whether they're going to do something now. Within the last 2 months, they're going to be in office. So we'll see, but not likely to happen, barring a miracle. But it's a shame that we are still at this point, and especially given that I feel that this genocide has been normalized in part with mainstream media, that there isn't any more of an outrage over this, given what's happening.
When we talked about Israel's secret plan, how long ago? Seems like a minute ago, where we knew exactly what that general's plan was. Now they seem to be just implementing it further. Better do something quick.
Right.
Running out of time. So, but anyway.
So, like I said, just wanted to report on that story real quick, as it was a breaking story. So, but if you want to hear more stories like these, if you have a smartphone, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the link at the bottom of your screen and type it in, and you can make a donation to the network as little as $1. Will be really helpful. to support our work here at INN News, as well as our colleagues here on INN. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as a way to fight this suppression on YouTube. And make sure you leave a comment and tell us what you think about this. And I'm just saying this, like, just because, the issue of Gaza, and I'm actually, just as an aside, I'm seeing people ignorant as liberals basically being like, well, how many people are going to be talking about Gaza now? Like, we've been talking about,
they will betray you.
Yeah, like, we've been talking about Gaza almost nonstop every week. So we're not going to stop necessarily, even though I've argued I'm getting fatigued from talking about Israel and Palestine pretty much every week. But as I said, I'll argue now that with Trump in position to become, to get into the White House again, we're probably going to see a lot more protests, possibly, hopefully. But even then, it's like, and just these people, just idiots, because these are the people that will make the complaint, but I'm not going to see them on the street. So,
yep.
So the fake Twitter out of it can shut the. But regardless, help us get to free K, so we're able to, so we're able to produce content like this, and you get to hear me cursing. And
yeah,
thanks for watching.
Yeah. All right. Well, we did it.
We did it.
We did it. Yeah, we did it. You ever watch, what is that, the Backyardigans? Kids ever had to watch the Backyardigans? I think they're redoing
Paw
another
Patrol
one.
Is like, no, Paw Patrol is like the thing in my class right now. So,
yep, that and Bluey. So, Copaganda and Bluey. Well, what do the chats have to say?
Crab went off, basically.
Yeah, Crab's wondering why people think Trump is going to ban condoms or something. He doesn't support a national abortion ban. I mean, his evangelical base probably does. Also, condoms are irrelevant, but I feel you. Also, it's a lot of fear mongering. So, but ugly face to ugly policies. Welcome to that. That happens pretty quick, don't it? Kamal and them could talk about that crap and get away with it.
Now they can. So.
Right. But anyway, what do we got this week? We don't have Indy to tell us. That's all.
So Angel going on Friday night at 7. Trying to think of Saturday. So Wrestling with Angel at 8, and I believe Himbo is going to be streaming. Is he streaming tomorrow or Saturday? I think he's streaming.
Probably tomorrow. I think they got a plan for tomorrow. I saw.
Yeah, I think it's tomorrow. He's streaming at 9, I believe. I remember. And then Angel streaming Angel in the afternoon at 7 on Friday night, and then wrestling at 8, I believe, also on Saturday night. Is Indy going to be back for How Do We Miss Out this week?
I don't think so.
On Sunday?
Not this week.
No,
2 weeks off.
Yeah, so right. Maple Files with Yeti and Himbo, potentially, depending if something happens, Monday night at, I want to say 9. Fairly certain there will be an American Tradition next Tuesday at 10.
Yeah.
Right? Why do I forget these times?
Our
and then,
brains are filled with other nonsense.
Yeah,
You know?
and then we'll be back via news next week at 9.
Yeah, same bad time, same bad channel.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, we did a lot.
Yeah.
So, but it's okay because I think we got maybe 8 segments out of this.
Yep.
So 7 or 8. So yeah.
Cool.
I'm tired though.
Yep. Remember, kids.
The light of America's promise will always burn bright.
Labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Bye, have a great time.